But it's kind of, interesting to compare the raw goods to where they come from and then how they appear on the ornaments. And I know kids sometimes ask, well, where do you get these things? What is a koi seed? And that was a good question. I had sort of assumed it was like a shell. So here we go, a little brighter a few years later on. And here's the cassowary. And this is one of the lizards that, yeah. And you can see from like some of the skin and stuff, I feel like with the amount of skin and its size that this is one of the ones that's used for drums quite frequently. And you can see here just, the amazing amount of feathers that cassowary has. Sea turtles of West Papua, they take a lot of pride in these. Have them on coins. This is my fun shot from the Academy of Sciences and the aquarium in San Francisco. I was like, yay! It was identified as being from West Papua. And here's the couscous, which is a very, very darling marsupial. I know, aren't they darling? Very fun. But one of the traits, so when you create a figure, and it's after an ancestor, when you do this carving, you include things that remind you of that person. So of their cleverness, of their wittiness, their generosity, etc. And so these animals are all considered to have traits, such as being fruit eaters and good at scavenging for fruit. And that, all plays into it, which is why I feel like the animals are such an important part of what we can communicate with grade school groups. And bringing attention here to the little curly tail. And I just thought this was a beautiful picture. And it particularly emphasized that curling tail. And, they can do a lot with that tail. They can hang from branches, they can climb, they can apparently do an amazing amount of activity using that tail. And so for that regard, it's much admired among the Asmat what the couscous does with the tail. Here's the hornbill. Uh-huh.
Is the prehensile tail, the woolly tail, part of the shield? Is that part of the shield?
That's where I'm going. I'm doing the long lead up, but I'm giving you lots of pictures, and you're so quick. You've already jumped ahead. That is fantastic. That's exactly the kind of moments I want you to have. And I feel that you have those moments better if you're allowed to, maybe bring in and then make the leap for yourself. It's always I always learn better that way if I have the moment of aha. And these are the flying foxes, the giant fruit bats. We have some at the zoo, and they have a lot of them at the zoo in Oakland. And I had a great epiphany where I was watching this globe trekker. And they weren't in New Guinea, they weren't in Asmat, but they were on one of the nearby island states. And they killed the big fruit bat, but how they chose to cook it was that they would prop up its wings with sticks. And all of a sudden, the shape of the shield, I just went, bammo, I get it. And I've never had a problem identifying the flying fox in one of the Asmat shields since. So I was trying to find images that give you a sense of that kind of pointedness. Here's one upside down. And they are very cute. They look like very nice dogs. Oh, and look at those little eyes. I'm an animal person. And they have all their clever adaptations to the environment, which are admired. And this was an attempt to just, me at the Oakland Zoo with the iPhone, capture just like what a bunch of them together look like and try to get a sense, in particular, of this shape right here. Wasn't the best resolution, wasn't the best light conditions, but that's what I was going for. And here's one flying, and it really looks like a fox. And that for me kind of, brought it home, this term flying fox. I was like, oh yeah. And And here we have the cassowary again. This is beautiful, beautiful coloring here. Okay, so how we get to the symbols. So this is where all their symbols are derived from. So you have the bipane, which is used for the nose pieces. It's a mysterious symbol, not really necessarily explained. A lot of these symbols are personal to families or personal to different groups within the Osmot region, but it's considered, powerful. And I think in part because in warfare, as we saw in that one picture or back a while, it makes you look very scary. It makes you look completely transformed, other. And then you have here an open clearing in the jungle or the tail of the couscous. There's a head of a pelican, for example, and a head of a hornbill. So notice the little ridges in the eye. And here, the flying fox, which now I understand why they have the wings go up rather than out. We have the praying mantis, which of course for more traditional things, praying mantises eat their spouses. And so that's something that would be meaningful to a headhunting culture. And here's another couscous tail, ending with the addition of a flying fox foot. And a turtle head, a mouse foot, and then a rayfish. And I point this out because on our spears that are on the wall, there is the rayfish pattern that's been carved in. There are also a frog and banyan tree roots, snakes, all of this that could be memorized. And it's a lot to memorize. So, but just, I think it's nice just to find a couple of these shapes that appeal to you. And once you know that they're there, then you can point them out. And it's also open to interpretation because it's very abstracted and they're bringing together a lot of elements. And what's actually being meant by the shield, we're not going to know for certain. Here, I wanted to show a little bit about the beige poles that we have. And when we display them in museums, we display them in ways that are not how they display them. So these are to honor ancestors. So typically, at the bottom, you have a long deceased ancestor. As you go up, you have the recently lost ancestor. So these are kind of things that are created at moments of sorrow. And then you have symbols of fertility at the very top. And poses that are included in these often are the praying mantis. So there's this very ingenious posturing and juxtaposition of figures in different directions. So this is an older slide. We don't call it Irian Jaya in Indonesia anymore. It's West Papua and it's Osmot. Typically, they're 18 feet high. And perhaps in the past, an enemy head would have been placed in the cavity at the base. Today, there would be something that would be more allegorical, an allegorical face. Ours are more recent vintage, so there would never have been a face, an actual head of an enemy. Again, the bent pose like a praying mantis. Birds are often shown breaking open nuts, and again, the reference to fertility. And these are my shots from the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, which has the Michael Rockefeller collection. And you can see, how grand these are, how elaborately carved. A lot of the same sort of features that are in ours. Little lower light levels, so the pigments are staying a little better. And it's a massive tradition, and it's a very fascinating tradition. Here is one of these canoes that we saw somebody using earlier, and you can see again those stripes, and then the way the oars would be displayed. And of course, an ancestor figure there on the front. And this becomes the Spirit Canoe, like what we have. Theirs is a little bit larger than ours and a little bit more ornate, but again, this was collected in 1961. And at that time, you know, some of the material that Michael Rockefeller was able to collect had maybe been 10 to 20 years old. Probably nothing from earlier than 1920 or so. I mean, one of the things with these groups is you feel like the older the object is, the closer you are to the actual traditions, to the lifestyles before Western contact, and that's just extremely hard to come by, even by the time Michael Rockefeller's collecting. So there are some amazing resources, and that is largely in the Netherlands, in these ethnographic museums they have. And this is one that's dated to 1698. And look how different the carving is. What do we think this is here? Yeah. It really looks like a flying fox. You got the little hands here. And then here, which is harder to see, and I'll sneak over here, you have the head of one with the head of another, and then the wings put together. And here's a person. And then another flying fox up here. And then often, the heads at the top are considered to be turtle heads or rayfish. And you can see how rough the carving is. And that's because they were doing it with stones and not with metal tools. And these were actually used in battle. They're tended to be lightweight with handles on the back that you could use. And the entire point of going into battle was just to appear as ferocious and fearsome as possible. And what you really wanted to do was have a skirmish and then have everybody back away and not actually have a lot of loss of life. But it was the action of going through this to resolve conflict. And then ultimately, a lot of conflict would be resolved by then having a big ceremonial feast with gifts exchanged. But there was still, you know, the posturing that happened. And this one in particular, very raw and very scary. So you have to think about in the jungle, if you're throwing white lime around, and you've got all these, you've got the bipaint coming out of your nose, you've got the feathers, you've got the body paint, and then these scary shields. You know, it's remarked in the scholarship that people commenting that the shields would be so scary that people would just turn around and run, that the effect would be so great. Like, I believe it, like Halloween on steroids. Again, I don't mean to trivialize their culture, I'm just trying to make it relatable to us. Again, another one with a big lizard. Sometimes, that one actually is probably a crocodile. In the face. Look at all those teeth. Very scary. And so when you talk with collectors or scholars of this material, you know, they want that power, that there's a charge. And you can feel that charge in these earlier examples. This one's very elaborate. Again, always a head, a face. And what look to be a combination of couscous tails and flying foxes. There's the couscous tails. So by the cover of Life in 1961, you can see already some changes in the sculpture from these earlier examples in Dutch collections. You know, things are a little bit smoother, but mind then, they have metal tools. Here's a very big figure. And just to point out what a couple of the things are, the rayfish head is here. This big symbol here that's kind of odd is the wading fish, and of course our flying fox right here. And this particular image really was what, you know, got to me, you know, in my mind. I just went, when they had the fruit bat up on sticks. And this is one in our collection. So fruit in the jungle, or a bone. So that's over here on the side, and it's hard to see. And then a food bowl shape, or a canoe, either one. And then, of course, this mysterious shell piece symbol. And I just showed this one, these are how they're often kept in the men's houses. The sculpture continues. There's more of a actual head now that's formed. We have examples of that. But you can see just how more patterned and decorative the treatment is. It's still very beautiful. Here's one of ours. Okay, so what do you see in this one? Yeah, so we've definitely got the ray fish here on the top. And we've got couscous. Lots of couscous. And then over here is the flying fox. Very ornate. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is the turtle head. Because see, the lines here. Yeah. And just drilling in deeper. So these little elements become, more, I think, clear. Another one of ours, again with the turtle head and other forms. I think this one's really clever with this very beautiful patterning of the flying fox. And these are even here, very large flying fox. See their little feet, their legs. And drilling in again. And I think it's really neat to point out how those little feet are. And it continues on to the drums. So this one's a pretty elaborate contemporary. And we know it's contemporary because of this open work, which was something that was not particularly native to the Osma until somebody with the Croziers said, hey, I'd like you to carve me this certain kind of thing. And they come up with this open work sculptural style. And many patterns here. I also like that it's less regular, that there's a lot more chaos going on. And to me, that seems to, feel a little bit more like the past. But we also have crocodiles on the drums. Again, detail of the flying foxes. Just that amazing pattern. And these shell patterns. Just a way to zone in on one section. And here's the hornbill on this old canoe. See the eye, the lines. And the turtle, of course. Yeah.
The spirit canoes like this, not the ones that we stand in, but would those have been used in conjunction with like the beach poles in terms of perhaps ceremony after the passing of someone?
Exactly. Exactly. And here's just one of the ones at the Met. And you can see that the treatment's a little different, a little earlier on. Still, again, the stripes and some additional carving. Ours is a little wee. And here's the documented design for the turtle, which is on our orphan. And so now you get a clearer sense of, okay, what's going on with this face? Well, this is meant to be a turtle. And then you have all the shapes in here. And of course, then the body costume with the raffia, or bast fibers. And again, a hornbill, and a hornbill. And these are actually considered crocodile ribs. And you see here the crocodile skin pattern. And look at this. This is an upside down person. And then he's meeting another ancestor figure to form a handle. And then you have what looks actually to be like a person here. But then also this very abstracted sort of mouse maybe, because it's got that form, but then it's got the little foot. And this is a very contemporary object. This is this tree of life, and it's telling all these stories about all the elements of nature. So here you have a lizard, and then you have a crocodile, have some couscous tails, and then look at this bird portrayed flying, and then this lovely serpent. Just a bigger example of the whole picture. One of the things that I'm including in this talk are the full body costumes. We are having a new case made. It is supposed to be installed shortly, and so we will have not just the one costume on display, but two more, so it'll be 3, and the additional 2 are more similar to this. And so these celebrations still happen, and it's a lot of weaving of these fibers, and then you have the palm fronds, which are green, and these are meant to be used but then discarded. And so that means there is somewhat of an industry for people to bring them out of the jungle. They do put them out in the jungle when they're done with them, and so then they dry out, their colors changes. And this is the back of one of our examples. This is one of the ones that will be going on display. We need to make that a little perkier. And then, of course, this figure. So I was going to stop there. And this was a very pointed conversation, and I know it may be a little boring. I don't know how you are on time. But I really thought that looking at the art in a lot of ways is more important than knowing a gazillion facts. Because what we're doing is we're given just a few minutes of attention. And I realize that more and more as I age, that those moments where we actually have people focused on us are very, very small. So if we can get them to, to guess or recognize, and some of the images are completely, of animals they're not familiar with. But the thing is, many of them are at our zoo, and they go to the zoo. So you can say, well, next time you go to the zoo, you might want to look at the flying fox. And I don't know. I don't have children. I don't have to do your jobs. But I do see you in there, and it seems like you enjoy talking about this material with them a great deal. My only other goal is that you recognize the division between oceanic art and African art. And that's the one thing that I think has been an ongoing challenge for some docents, and I think for incoming docents, is to know that even though there's certain similarities in color and materials, there is a dividing line. And the more you look, the more that dividing line becomes clear. You don't need somebody up here, berating you that this is African, this is Asmat, oh my God, you're making a mistake. That's not it. It's just a matter of slowing down, bearing with me, and taking a time to just really look for a few minutes. And so I hope in that regard there's some reward there. Here's the thing, and that is most of this carving, other than shields, for example, are meant for temporary purposes. And these costumes, they're all surrounded around these activities, these very elaborate feasts that are very hard to explain. They can last for months, and they have very many social rituals attached to them, like when you share gifts with other people in the next village, or when somebody who's considered to be wealthy in your own little village and your own family has to provide a feast to everyone. It's a lot of complicated manners that honestly do not seem any worse than Thanksgiving in my family. So. Because God forbid you don't go in immediately and start washing a dish if you're a female. So lo and behold, you're just marked princess for the rest of your life. And so I've embraced it. I am a princess. Don't have me to Thanksgiving is what I'm saying. So, so these are constructed and they lean. They don't actually go back and guard a house or anything. And at the time that they're done with this feast period, with this mourning period, when they feel like the healing that's needed to happen by bringing the community together, to put off whatever bad omen, or just it's a time, several people have died and they haven't had a ceremony in a while, and now it's time to mourn for many, many people. These go into the jungle, and they're left to rot. Their purpose has been served. And it's the same with those dance costumes. They do what they're supposed to do and they go away. Now, other objects, we have a very long object hanging on a wall. And that object is something that actually gets put up in the rafters. And the shields will be put up in the rafters. And they do open cooking without chimneys in these houses, these min houses that we call jus. And so everything gets a smoky flavor. It's well barbecued in that sense. And yeah.
So my understanding is the beach poles and the spirit books, things like that, they're not intended as art. They're intended more as ritual, and they don't do things to preserve them. How do the people feel about museums and people coming in and procuring these very spiritual pieces?
And this is that dichotomy, cataclysm, whatever is the best vocabulary word for dealing with it in this moment in time. And that is because you have tradition and then you have market. So our Spirit Canoe is a market. It's too small, it's charming, it's something people who visit find charming. It's something that people export out to sell in gallery shops. And I find it interesting that there is a boosterism to these collectors and to how they will argue that, no, this is an authentic thing. But when you deal with people who've been studying and working with Asmat objects in the tribal market for a long time, they will be like, no, this is for the market.